In my past life, my concubine-born sister and I got married on the same day. I was the legitimate daughter, appointed as the crown princess. She, on the other hand, was betrothed by her father to the Minister of Personnel, who was over 50, as his second wife. Who knew that on the day of the grand wedding, she schemed to switch marriages with me? By the time I rushed to the Eastern Palace, she had already consummated her marriage with the crown prince. She thought that with her looks and schemes, she could climb her way up step by step, but she underestimated the power of my maternal grandfather's family. I exhausted every scheme, yet ultimately only ended up with the title of side consort. But all my life, I was never favored by the crown prince. Bearing the hollow title of empress, I frittered away my time deep within the palace. The day the city fell, I took up a sword and stabbed the emperor and my concubine-born sister, the noble consort, to death. I swallowed poison, then started a fire that burned down my cunning palace. When I opened my eyes again, I found I had returned to the time before my wedding. Smiling, I put on my wedding dress and personally sent my concubine-born sister into the Eastern Palace. In this life, it is my turn to be the chess player. Before my concubine-born sister and I were wed, father had gone to the palace once. Not long after, a eunuch brought 2 sets of phoenix crowns and cloud capes to the prime minister's manor, saying that the emperor and empress, mindful of father's distinguished service, had specially bestowed this gift. Me concubine-born sister stared at that extraordinarily luxurious wedding dress, her eyes lighting up. That wedding dress was embroidered in gold thread, with a flying phoenix holding a pearl in its beak. The skill of the palace seamstresses was unquestionable, but what was truly precious was that pearl. It was originally from the empress's own phoenix crown, and she had specially ordered the Imperial Clothing Bureau to embroider it onto the crown princess's wedding dress. I know that this singular honor is all due to my maternal grandfather's family, backing me the Hmong clan of Yeonjong. Concubine, Lian patted my concubine-born sister's hand to comfort her, and only then did she unwillingly withdraw her gaze. I stared blankly at that splash of red, my mind completely empty. Have I been reborn? I could no longer hear clearly what father was saying. The surrounding sounds receded like a tide. All I could see was that wedding dress, its color as red as the fire that burned down Cunning Palace. Jawa, seeing me in a daze, father said coldly, "You are the legitimate elder sister. You must show the bearing of an elder sister. Shiwei is marrying beneath her station, which is already a grievance. So what if you yield to her?" Yield what? I didn't react for a moment. But when I looked up and saw those 2 sharply contrasting wedding dresses, I understood. I am a daughter of the Pei family. In such trivial matters, I naturally obey father's arrangements. Father stroked his beard and nodded. Worthy of being a legitimate daughter of my Pi family. This is the magnanimity you ought to have. I was sick of hearing such perfunctory words. My concubine-born sister's expression suddenly turned cold. She fights with me over everything, from the position of crown princess down to a single word of praise from father. In my past life, I argued vehemently with father. The crown princess's wedding dress must conform to ritual protocol. I firmly refused to swap, which angered father. I glanced at Nanny Song beside me, who had been sent from the palace to teach me etiquette. She was Crown Prince Xiao Chengsheng's wet nurse, and they were as close as mother and son. The crown princess's etiquette matrons have always been people from the empress's palace. In my past life, I thought this was the crown prince's special care for me, until the night before my wedding, when I was punished by father to kneel in the ancestral hall. Matron Song stood outside the ancestral hall and spoke unhurriedly. The crown princess will one day be the mother of the nation. If you don't even have this much tolerance, how are you worthy to stand alongside the crown prince? I once thought that was just because the palace rules were strict, so when father scolded me, she kept silent. Later, in the palace, I saw her looking lovingly at my concubine-born sister as she stayed by the crown prince's side. Only then did I realize that everyone around the crown prince knew who he truly loved. It is just a pity that I was kept in the dark all along. Then in this life, I'll grant you too your wish. Thank you, sister, for granting our wish. My half-sister insincerely thanked me, but her eyes showed she was dead set on seizing power. I laughed it off. I also wish that you get your heart's desire, sister. The crown princess has never relied on the crown prince's favor to survive in the palace. Then let me see how a mere concubine's daughter, bearing the title of crown princess, will survive in that man-eating eastern palace. I slept restlessly at night. My dreams were filled with fire. The day Shengjing fell, holding a long sword in my hand, I personally cut down Emperor Xiaochengsheng and my concubine-born sister, noble consort Pei Shiwei. Carried their heads to see the enemy leader. I knelt in a pool of blood and agreed on 3 rules with the enemy general: no burning, killing, looting, or raping upon entering the city, and the common people must be treated kindly. Originally, I had wanted to offer up the map of Great Zhou as a token of my sincerity, but the Shu clan of Qingchuan was more pragmatic than I. Long before I arrived, they had offered up the map in exchange for the lives of the Shu clan. In the end, I fulfilled a bit of my duty as the Empress of Great Zhou. Set fire to my own cunning palace. Afraid that I wouldn't die thoroughly enough, I also took poison. Before I died, I felt regret. Why did I act out of momentary spite to fight Pei Shiwei for the position of crown princess, only to bury my life in this deep palace? Xiaochengsheng didn't love me, and I didn't love him. Xiaochengsheng was hypocritical and cowardly, lusting after women. Though he was the crown prince, he held no real power. I looked down on him from the bottom of my heart. At that time, the fate of Great Zhou was thinning, yet the lineage of the noble clans remained as flourishing as ever. You could even say that the ones controlling the court were precisely the Meng clan of Yunzhong and the Shu clan of Qingchuan. This was also why my father, a prime minister, would betroth his treasured daughter to the minister of personnel, a man over 50, because that minister was surnamed Shu years ago. The only daughter of the head of the Meng clan of Yunzhong married a poor scholar named Pei Tingqian, although the latter rose step by step to become the prime minister. He was always criticized by the noble families for the mismatch in social status. And I was born of that legitimate daughter, the only granddaughter of the Meng clan of Yunzhong from a young age, everyone told me. Pei Zhaohua, the blood of the Meng clan flows in your veins. In the future, you will surely be beneath 1 person and above 10,000. So I didn't dare slack off for a single day, and with my own hands, I supported Xiaocheng, who was like a pile of rotten mud, onto the throne. I reviewed memorials and upheld the political situation for him, working from dawn till dusk and exhausting my mind. Yet, I ended up with the infamy of a demon empress who ruined the country. But what about him? He was addicted to beauty and neglected the affairs of state. When the nation broke and the city fell, he didn't even have the courage to die for his country. He only thought of running away with Pei Shiwei. He ordered people to tie them to the city wall. I wanted him to see with his own eyes that great general who guarded the nation's gate to the death for him, only to be hung up and humiliated after he died. That young corpse hung high at the top of the pole. From a distance, I couldn't see his features clearly, but it made my heart ache to the extreme. I wanted him to look at the displaced, wailing commoners all over the city. Those were his subjects, nourishing the imperial family with their flesh and blood, yet finally discarded lightly like a piece of rotten cloth. In my life, there was too much unwillingness. Whether it was wasting time in the deep palace, or the country ruined and the family destroyed, all the unwillingness turned to dust and smoke in that great fire. The side door of the Prime Minister's residence opened quietly, and a letter was brought out by my personal maid Chengxi, sent to a business in Shengjing marked with the Meng clan's cloud pattern. 3 days later, I burned the reply from my maternal grandfather's family over a candle flame. In a flash, the auspicious day determined by the Directorate of Astronomy arrived. The wedding matron dressed me up while muttering away, saying auspicious words. One comb to the end, two combs till white hairs match the eyebrows. Just then, Pi Shiwei stormed into my room like a whirlwind. What she was wearing was precisely the wedding dress tailored by the Imperial Clothing Bureau for the crown princess of the Eastern Palace. It was dazzlingly brilliant, making her look even more charming and alluring. "Sister, look. Doesn't this wedding dress suit me better?" Pei Shiwei spread her arms and twirled in a circle before me, showing off with evident smugness. The atmosphere in the room shifted slightly, and everyone curbed their smiles. This ceremonial robe originally belonged to the crown princess, yet she, a mere successor wife, was wearing it so brazenly. It was simply too presumptuous. But Pei Shiwei didn't feel the slightest bit amiss. Her expression was brimming with unconcealable triumph. I stood up, and under everyone's panicked gaze, walked towards her and raised my hand. The wedding matron and the maids all thought I was furious, subconsciously holding their breath, not daring to make a sound. But I just chuckled softly, fixed Pi Shiwei's crooked gold hairpin, my tone as gentle as a real sister sending her younger sister off to get married. "You are getting married, yet you are still this clumsy. No one's going to spoil you anymore. The deep palace is eerie and secluded. Let's see if this cowardly and incompetent crown prince can shelter you from the wind and rain." Pei Shiwei was stunned for a moment, then suddenly slapped my hand away with a smack. "Sister, you'd better just worry about yourself. That man and I have long understood each other's hearts. He will surely treat me like a precious treasure." I looked down at the red mark on my wrist, and the corner of my lips hooked up. "Then I wish you get exactly what you want, sister." Sounds of urging came from outside the room, and only then did Pi Shiwei leave, strutting away arrogantly. The boudoir fell into a dead silence. Quiet enough to hear a pin drop. Gone was the earlier lively cheer. I sat back down in front of the dressing mirror, watching the wedding matron's cautious manner in the bronze mirror, and spoke calmly. "Continue." The wedding matron hurriedly picked up the comb and continued doing my hair, but her movements were far more cautious than before, terrified that I would take my anger out on them. I really wasn't angry, and I genuinely wished Pi Shiwei well. After all, if she couldn't marry Xiao Changsheng, what drama would be left for me to watch? Shengjing was exceptionally lively today. The entire city was buzzing about the weddings of the Prime Minister's two daughters. The legitimate daughter marries into the Eastern Palace as the crown princess, while the concubine-born daughter is betrothed to the Minister of Personnel as a second wife. Both are heaven-sent matches, a truly wonderful tale. Amidst the joyful sounds of wind and string instruments, I was carried into the mansion of the Minister of Personnel. The Master of Ceremonies called out loudly, "First bow to heaven and earth." I reached out and lifted the red veil, throwing it on the ground. Under the gaze of the hall full of guests, I sat in the main seat reserved for the high elders. The guests were in an uproar, casting sidelong glances, unable to react in time. Minister Shu's wrinkled old face was already twitching slightly, his mouth smacking, faintly revealing a sinister air. He waved his hand. The butler understood and politely ushered the guests out one by one. Even Minister Shu's son and daughter-in-law were asked to leave. The huge hall fell silent in an instant, leaving only me and Minister Shu sitting across from each other. That gaze which had been fixed on me finally vanished. "Eldest Miss Pei." Minister Shu spoke slowly, a sharp glint flashing through his eyes. "I wonder where my new bride has gone. What do you think?" Minister Shu stared at me for a moment, then suddenly chuckled aloud. "What is the meaning of this, Lord Prime Minister? If he was unwilling to marry off your sister, he could have just said so. Why play such tricks on my Shu family?" Minister Shu naturally did not believe that the sole granddaughter of the Hmong clan of Yunzhong was here to take the bride's place. Naturally, it is because someone intends to corrupt the bloodline of the Eastern Palace and plotted this marriage swap. Minister Shu's smile gradually faded away. If Pei Shiwei had simply run away from the wedding, he would at most lose face for a while and become gossip over tea and meals for a few days. But if Pei Shiwei is truly inside the Eastern Palace right now, if the matter blows up, I am afraid his ex-Yu family won't be able to escape the blame. In the last life, after the marriage swap occurred, he was demoted and posted away. It took half his fortune in bribes just to remain in Shengjing, and his end was bleak. "What do you want?" he asked bluntly. "No rush." I took a sip of tea, my fingertips lightly tapping the table, calculating the time until the people from the palace arrived, seeing me so leisurely and composed. Minister Shu was helpless. I started talking about his son as if making idle chatter. "I hear the young gentleman of the minister's manor has a face like the mid-autumn moon and a complexion like flowers at spring dawn. Eldest Miss Pei, if you have something to say, just say it straight. The commoners of Shengjing all saw my bridal sedan enter your manor with their own eyes. My innocence is already ruined," I said faintly. "But a daughter of the Meng clan of Yunzhong would never become your second wife. I certainly couldn't hope to climb so high." Minister Shu gave a forced smile. "I've set my sights on your son." Minister Shu spat out a mouthful of tea, choking until his eyes went red, and hurriedly waved his hands, saying, "Eldest Miss P has a precious body and is born with the destiny of a phoenix. My son is merely a concubine's child. A cheap life. We absolutely dare not climb so high." Footsteps were approaching. I slowly stood up and looked out the door. "That is not for you to decide." As soon as the words fell, a shrill voice suddenly called out loudly from outside. Verbal edict from the emperor, summoning Minister Shu and Miss Pei for an audience. I curled my lips into a smile. My maternal grandfather's people were indeed timely. I entered the palace together with Minister Shu to have an audience with the emperor. High above in the great hall, the emperor and empress sat side by side, their expressions exuding authority without anger. The crown prince knelt in the hall, his wedding robe slightly disheveled, and a bruise at the corner of his lips. Who knows who he had gotten into a fight with? Yet, in such a wretched state, he still stubbornly held onto Pi Shiwei's hand, as if he and Pi Shiwei would kneel there forever, until the emperor and empress agreed to let them be together. Truly deep affection. I couldn't help but sigh, though my gaze was stolen away by the tall young man standing beside them. "Cousin, I never expected that the person sent by the Meng clan of Yunzhong would be him, the future head of the Meng clan of Yunzhong, the top-ranked gentleman among all the noble sons Meng Yuanji." Me heart trembled, but I was immediately snapped back to reality by the empress's scolding. "Are you truly insisting on marrying Pi Shiwei?" The empress could hardly conceal her anger. As a daughter born of a concubine, she is unworthy of being the crown princess. "Mother, your son cares not for the gaze of the world, only that she is the one your son loves in his heart," Xiao Chengsheng replied in a deep voice. The emperor frowned slightly, seemingly helpless, and turned to me. "Xiaohua, would you be willing?" "Willing for two women to serve one husband." I read the implication in the emperor's words. Everyone's gaze landed on me in unison. After all, I counted as the biggest victim in this affair. I slowly stepped forward and bowed in greeting. "Your Majesties, this humble daughter only learned today that His Highness the Crown Prince and my concubine-born sister have long shared mutual affection. Getting on the wrong bridal sedan chair today and marrying the right groom serves as proof that this is a marriage ordained by fate. Therefore, I am willing to yield the position of crown princess to bring the two of them together." The empress laughed coldly. "You certainly make it sound dignified. As for the rights and wrongs, the hearts of those present were like clear mirrors. The empress wouldn't have been this furious originally, with just a light punishment. This matter could have been handled gently. Just like in the previous life, I would still be the crown princess, and my concubine-born sister would be titled the crown prince's side consort. It is just a pity that the ones who exposed this scandal happened to be people from my maternal grandfather's Meng clan. The one who came this time is the future head of the Meng family, Meng Yuanji. The royal family is bound to give an explanation. My expression was composed, neither dodging nor yielding, only my voice was choked with sobs. I also feel wronged. But since the deed is done, I beg the Emperor and Empress to grant the two their wish. After a silence in the hall, I could hear people present discussing among themselves, truly worthy of being raised by the Meng family. Worlds apart from that base-born one. Pei Shiwei's body trembled slightly, and the eyes looking at me were wrapped in unconcealable malice. The Empress asked, "Since you speak of stepping aside, are you willing to give up your position? Your subject is willing with all her heart." The Empress wanted to say more, but the Emperor waved his hand to stop her, looking at me and saying, "I cannot let the Meng clan's heart grow cold. Speak, what requests do you have?" I brought out the explanation I gave to Minister Shu. The Emperor immediately called Minister Shu forward to reply. "My dear Minister Shu, do you have any sons in your family who are not yet married?" Minister Shu answered, "I still have a young son born of a concubine at home. He barely counts as quick-witted, managed to rank first in the provincial exams, and will take the spring exams next year." The Emperor stroked his beard in thought and asked, "Is he called Shu Husheng?" "Precisely. I have long heard this boy is talented and learned, and handsome in appearance. Paired with Xiaohua, they would indeed be a talented man and a beautiful woman, a fine match. It is just that his status." Minister Shu hurriedly replied, "As soon as I return, I will register him under the legitimate wife's name." The Emperor laughed heartily. "This works out perfectly. I'll have someone draft the marriage decree later." Meng Yuanji was just about to step forward to speak, but was stopped by a look from me. The Empress said, "Your Majesty, that Pei Shiwei is merely a concubine's daughter, and so calculating, how could she ever be the mother of the nation? In my opinion, making her a secondary consort is already a great honor. Let it be as the Empress says." My concubine-born sister was indignant, but she had no choice but to offer thanks alongside the crown prince. Red candles flickered, the bridal chamber was quiet. Rustling footsteps came from outside the door, and with a creak, the door was opened. "Miss, the new master instructed me to bring you something to eat." Chungshi held a tray. On the plates were those few pastries from Xinfangjai that I love to eat. I picked up a piece and started eating it slowly. Chungshi chirped non-stop like a little sparrow, "Miss. You have no idea. The groom was so majestic during the wedding procession today." I chuckled. "Majestic in what way?" "I've seen the world with you, miss, which young gentleman could compare to young Master Cousin." "That is not a lie. Cousin is versed in both the pen and the sword. His fame has long resounded throughout the great show." As it turned out, today the young master blocked the door and came up with quite a few questions, but the groom didn't even bat an eye and answered them all fluently. The young master said he was thoroughly convinced, and only then did he let him in. The sound of footsteps came from outside the door again. The maid immediately stopped talking and quietly retreated. A pair of black short boots stopped in front of me. I had already guessed who it was. Although he smelled of alcohol, his steps were steady. He simply stood before me, making no other movement for a long while. "Husband, even though it is our wedding night, it is not right for me to make the first move. Not counting the day I was carried into the minister's manor, this is the first time I've met him in this life. Shu Huisheng, I've come to see you." The bridal veil was slowly lifted by the wedding scale, and the first thing to catch my eye was Shu Huisheng's hands, with knuckles like bamboo. In my past life, it was these very hands that covered mine as I held a long sword, chopping off the heads of that tyrant Xiao Chengsheng and that treacherous concubine Pei Shiwei. He looked up and met his gaze. Shu Husheng's face, fair as white jade, suddenly flushed red like burning clouds. His lips moved for a long while before he finally uttered, "Wife." This was the same man who disregarded everything to charge into a sea of fire, just to die with me. I couldn't help but chuckle. Chancellor Shu had always been decisive and ruthless. I had never seen such a shy side of him before. My heart itched unbearably. For a Shu Huisheng like this, It wouldn't be so bad to lower myself and make the first move. My index finger lightly hooked his lapel. He obediently bent down and lowered his head. Following my movements, Shu Wusheng looked at me with glistening eyes, full of boundless deep affection. I feigned a flirtatious air. Husband, a moment of this spring night is worth 1,000 gold. Let us not waste this beautiful time. Shu Wusheng was only dazed for a moment before clasping my hand in return, saying with a husky voice, "Wife, don't let your hand tremble." I smiled gently, a blush unconsciously flying to my cheeks, instantly letting Shu Wusheng regain the upper hand. He took my hand to help me up, and we went to sit by the table. Seeing the 2 cups of wine on the table, I realized what step we had missed. Shu Wusheng handed one of the cups to me. "Wife, it is time to drink the nuptial wine." The auspicious dragon and phoenix wedding candles burned down inch by inch, the wax drippings piling up layer upon layer on the candlesticks, a night of lovely spring passion. Today is the day Pi Shiwei and I returned to her maiden home. Shu Wusheng accompanied me back to the Prime Minister's manor. We were dressed and ready to go early in the morning, but were delayed for a while because I met my cousin Meng Yuanji at a tea house on the way. Just as Shu Wusheng and I arrived, he was called to the study by father to be tested on his studies in preparation for next year's spring exams. Pei Shiwei, however, showed up late, as if intentionally trying to one-up me. I had no intention of competing with her over precedence, so I just sat down in the hall to drink tea. Pei Shiwei walked up to me and said smugly, "Sister, your clothes are way too shabby." Then again, "So what if you are the legal wife? Shu Wusheng is just a concubine-born son. How can he compare to the crown prince?" I put down my teacup, glanced at her getup, which was decked out like a festival from head to toe, and replied, playing along with her, "Naturally, I can't compare to you, sister, dripping with jewels like that." Pei Shiwei didn't catch the sarcasm. She was pleased to hear that, but still dissatisfied. "Sister, you really have no manners. I am now the crown prince's side consort. You should be kneeling to welcome me." I sneered. "Sister, you sure have a lot of nerve. I am the crown prince's side consort, and you are just the wife of a scholar with no rank. How can you compare to my noble status?" After saying that, she directed her attending maids to force me to kneel. I slammed my palm on the table, startling the teacup into a tremble. Those people looked at Pi Shiwei hesitantly. "Pei Jiahua, you used to always hold your status as the Prime Minister's legitimate daughter over me. If your mother hadn't stolen my father's love, my mother would have been the legal wife, and the crown princess title should have been mine. Is that so?" I glanced at her with disdain, rolled up my right sleeve, revealing a ghastly old scar on my arm. It was this scar that let me become the crown princess, and it was also this scar that allowed father to rise rapidly through the ranks. Back then, for the sake of power, father abandoned his childhood sweetheart, whose family had declined. After much scheming, he married my mother, a legitimate daughter of the Meng clan, only to be spurned by the noble families for being an improper match, which was of no help to his official career. Father turned right around and redeemed his sweetheart, who had ended up in a brothel, bringing her into the manor as concubine Lian. Mother was literally angered to death. I was taken to the Meng clan in Yunzhong to be raised, only returning to Shangjing when I was nearly of age. A palace banquet. I noticed an assassin. As everyone scattered in panic, I risked my life to block a fatal blade for the emperor. I earned the position of crown princess with my life, yet she only sees the prestige of being a legitimate daughter of the prime minister's manor. By the emperor's oral decree, I need not kneel or bow when meeting any imperial relatives. I enunciated every word. Could it be that you, sister, a secondary consort to the crown prince, are more noble than the emperor? Pei Shiwei's face instantly went pale. She froze on the spot, words stuck in her throat, unable to speak. Just then, an announcement came from outside. "His Highness the Crown Prince has arrived." Pei Shiwei instantly found her backing. She hurriedly went to meet him and said aggrievedly, "Your Highness." Xiao Chengsheng strode in, pulled Pei Shiwei into his arms, swept a glance over me from head to toe, and then gently coaxed Pei Shiwei. "What is the matter? You look like a pitiful little kitten. Who bullied you?" Pei Shiwei's tears slid down like pearls. Elder sister refused to curtsy to me, saying I am merely a side consort to the crown prince and unworthy of her respects. Xiao Chengsheng's gaze darkened as he looked at me, his tone lukewarm. "Zhao, I know I have wronged you. If you have a grudge, just take it out on me. Shiwei is your younger sister, and she has always been timid. Why must you be so aggressive?" I let out a cold laugh. The crown prince calls me aggressive, but I was merely drinking tea just now. It was actually sister who demanded I kneel the moment she spoke. Pei Shiwei hurriedly shook her head. "Your Highness, I didn't. Sister is slandering me. I beg your Highness to do justice for me." Xiao Chengsheng's face was dark and gloomy. "Pei Zhaohua, Shiwei is simply more noble than you. If she wants you to pay respects, you pay respects. If she wants you to kneel, you have to kneel for me." Pei Shiwei snuggled into Xiao Chengsheng's arms, looking at me with a smug expression. I said calmly, "Has the crown prince forgotten? That day when I entered the palace to meet the emperor, I didn't even kneel. Is she, a mere Pei Shiwei, higher than the emperor's dragon majesty?" I lowered my voice and said unhurriedly, "Or is it that the crown prince has long harbored treasonous intent?" Xiao Chengsheng's status came from his mother. He was reincarnated into the empress's belly and was the crown prince from birth. But all these years he has been completely mediocre, while his younger brothers have only become more impressive as they grew older. Xiao Chengsheng had gotten anxious long ago. He was even secretly poisoning the emperor, wanting to ascend the throne sooner to avoid any complications. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chengsheng pushed Pei Shui away as if pricked by a needle, and under Pei Shui's stunned gaze, he backhanded her with a slap. "You ignorant woman, Pei Chaohua does not need to kneel when meeting imperial relatives. This is imperial father's holy decree. You have such gall to dare overstep your bounds." Pei Shiwei covered her face, looking at Xiao Chengsheng in disbelief. I curled my lips into a smile. So much for love stronger than gold. Pei Shiwei glared at me viciously. It was clearly she who provoked, and the crown prince who hit her. Yet she skillfully pinned all the blame on me. The crown prince flung his sleeve. This matter must not be mentioned again in the future. Father received the report from the servant and hurriedly came out to welcome Xiao Chengsheng. Shu Husheng walked up to my side, his eyes asking me if I was all right. I gently shook my head. Just then, the sharp, high-pitched voice of a eunuch came from outside. "The imperial decree has arrived." Everyone's expressions changed in unison as they knelt on the ground, while I remained standing motionless. Pei Chaohua, the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister, is of upright character and virtuous nature. She is hereby granted the title of Princess Changle, with a fiefdom of 2,000 households, and is additionally bestowed a princess manor. Respect this. I respectfully received the imperial decree. I knew in my heart that this was the emperor's compensation to the Hmong clan of Yonzhong, and His Highness, the crown prince, angered the emperor because of the scheme with Pei Shiwei to swap brides. So he was stripped of 2,000 households from his fief. His Highness, the crown prince, was furious. He didn't even eat and just left straight away. Shu Huisheng and I waited until after lunch, then left hand in hand. The carriage returning to the minister's manor took a detour, and Shu Huisheng got off halfway. I propped up my chin, watching his back as he went to Xinfangzhai to buy pastries for me. Even though we haven't been married for long, he knows my preferences inside out. On the day of the wedding, the food prepared was also all my favorites. In this life, the turn of events is different from the previous life. For instance, Xiao Chengsheng accompanying a side consort back to her maiden home with such great fanfare this time is naturally because he wants to back up Pei Shiwei. In my past life, Xiao Chengsheng certainly didn't accompany me back for the return visit. For one, When the crown princess returns home, the crown prince, as the heir apparent, need not accompany her. Secondly, Xiao Chengsheng was tied up with urgent business at the time, and simply didn't have time to accompany me back for the visit. I specifically helped him solve this matter ahead of time, which is what gave him the chance to back up Pi Shiwei. I hope this amorous crown prince will be grateful for my kindness. Miss, a letter from your cousin. Just as I returned to the manor, Chungxi came forward to meet me, smiling as she handed over Meng Yuanji's letter with both hands, and only then did she pay her respects to Xu Huisheng. Greetings, master son-in-law. I took the letter, swept a glance at Xu Huisheng without batting an eyelid, my tone gentle yet carrying a hint of reproach as I lightly tapped Chungxi's forehead. I've told you so many times, you need to change how you address me to avoid giving people something to gossip about. Chungxi has been with me since she was little, even when I was with the Meng clan in Yunzhong. She was the one personally looking after me. As soon as the words left my mouth, she knew where I stood. She immediately lowered her head in assent and bowed respectfully. Young master, madam, this servant will take her leave. I held the envelope between my fingers, still unopened. Xu Huisheng stood to the side carrying some pastries, saying in a natural tone, "Wife is the imperial decree to be enshrined in the ancestral hall, or put in the study." I raised my eyes to glance at that bright yellow silk cloth and said indifferently, "It is just the title of a princess. As for this piece of cloth, just find any random box to stow it away in." Xu Huisheng really did just casually grab a wooden box, packed the imperial edict inside, and placed it onto the curio shelf on the side. I sat down to open the letter, while Xu Huisheng found a low stool, moved it over to my side, and sat down. I was engrossed in the letter, but suddenly felt a tight grip on my ankle. "What are you doing?" I looked down and glared at him. Xu Huisheng smiled with a look of innocence. "Let me rub your feet, wife. You are worn out from the journey and ought to rest." He actually really took off my boots, his movements gentle as he began to massage me. I felt a bit awkward and tried to pull my foot back, but couldn't break free from his large hand. "Wife, go ahead and read cousin's letter," he smiled, a pure and harmless smile. "I'll relieve your fatigue." He paused, then added another sentence in a leisurely tone. "You and cousin really are close, wifey. You only met this morning, and now he is sending a letter this afternoon." I immediately picked up on the subtle jealousy in his tone. Not knowing whether to laugh or cry, I gave him a kick. "Read it yourself." I shoved the letter at him, my tone calm. "It is a letter from Lady Meng, urging him to return for an urgent matter. Cousin is leaving Shengjing this afternoon. Perhaps he has already left the city gates by now." Xu Huisheng took the letter without speaking, while I gazed out the window, my heart gradually sinking. The last time I saw my cousin was atop the city walls of Shengjing. His corpse had been whipped by the enemy army, hung high for all to see. I couldn't make out that mangled, bloody face. He was the most outstanding young man among all the noble clans, skilled with both the pen and the sword, possessing a character of high integrity. Yet, for my sake, he rushed 1,000 miles to lead the army in a fight to the death to defend the gates of Shengjing, while I, in order to save the people in the city, made peace with the ones who killed him. I clenched my fists, my nails digging deep into my palms. Yet I felt nothing. Suddenly, a pair of large, warm hands covered mine, prying my fingers apart one by one. Xu Huisheng's voice was raspy yet firm. "Don't cry. I'll take you to see Meng Yuanji." As soon as the words left Xu Huisheng's mouth, I realized my face was icy cold. Turns out, I was crying. Outside the long pavilion, beside the ancient road. Outside the city, the withered grass was half green, half yellow, and the autumn wind swirled the sand. "Cousin, beware of the Xu clan of Qingchuan. They have long since colluded with the enemy and betrayed the country." Meng Yuanji's expression hardened, his gaze turning to Xu Huisheng not far away, brows knitting slightly. "Jiahua, I understand you less and less. Since you knew the Shu clan would collude with the enemy and betray the country, why did you give up being a perfectly good crown princess to marry Shu Huisheng? Then why make me send that person into the Eastern Palace? Meng Yuanji swung onto his horse, looking at me with a deep gaze. If one day you don't want to stay in Shengjing anymore, I'll take you back to Yunzhong. Shu Huisheng called out loudly, "Cousin, wait." Meng Yuanji stopped the motion of swinging his whip. Shu Huisheng handed over a scroll. Meng Yuanji slowly opened it. With just a simple glance, the shock on his face was impossible to hide. "This is a detailed map of the Qingchuan Shu clan. Please burn it after reading, cousin," Shu Huisheng said in a deep voice. Meng Yuanji carefully folded the scroll. Then, on horseback, he bowed deeply with cupped hands toward Shu Huisheng, his gratitude written all over his face. The sound of hoofbeats faded away, and the dust settled. But in Shengjing, a storm was brewing. Word was that the emperor was unwell. In the spring exams, Shu Huisheng came out on top, achieving the triple first. Not long after Xiao Chengsheng married Pei Shiwei, he took in a secondary consort Yun. This girl grew up with Xiao Chengsheng. Although her status was humble, she was Xiao Chengsheng's white moonlight. She was the daughter of Xiao Chengsheng's wet nurse. In the previous life, Xiao Chengsheng couldn't bear to trap her in the palace, so he sent her out of the palace early and arranged a marriage for her. But who knew that man wasn't a good match? The white moonlight girl was tormented until she fell ill and died early. From then on, Pei Shiwei, whose face bore some resemblance to that white moonlight girl, became the darling of Xiao Chengsheng's heart. Even Xiao Chengsheng's wet nurse repeatedly helped Pei Shiwei frame me, just because of that face that looked like her own daughter who died young. In this life, I had Meng Yuanji do whatever it took to send that girl into the Eastern Palace. I refused to believe that Xiao Chengsheng wouldn't be moved. Sure enough, Pei Shiwei quickly fell out of favor. But her methods were vicious. She was actually willing to use the unborn child in the manner to frame that white moonlight girl. But the white moonlight had her own mother protecting her, and she was no pushover either. So Pei Shiwei found an excuse and had someone secretly dispose of the crown prince's wet nurse. From then on, the Eastern Palace was in a state of utter chaos every day. Xiao Chengsheng was repeatedly impeached by the imperial censors regarding his private conduct, and his household knew no peace. The emperor grew increasingly displeased with the crown prince, repeatedly promoting several of the crown prince's younger brothers. This matter caused a huge uproar, and even the common folk were discussing it. At this time, everyone in Shengjing was saying, "I had a good eye returning from the Chuanglan banquet." Shu Huisheng looked worried. "I'm afraid the emperor won't live past a few months," he whispered, his tone inexplicably certain. I tied the note to the carrier pigeon's leg, took a deep breath, and released it into the sky. Shu Huisheng hadn't fully sobered up yet. I turned around and happened to meet his sleepy eyes. Taking a few steps to the desk, I leaned over, lifted this newly appointed top scholar's chin with my index finger, and gave a light smile. Shu Huisheng was dazzled by my smile, and coupled with the fact that he was drunk, he looked dazed and stupefied. "Then let's muddy the waters. What do you say, Prime Minister Shu?" The last two words, I almost said through gritted teeth. Shu Huisheng didn't panic. Instead, he vaulted over the desk, pulled me into his arms, and whispered against my ear, "Didn't your highness figure it out long ago?" Yes. Shu Huisheng never hid anything when acting in front of me. He underwent rebirth just like me. Back then, to break the deadlock, I chose carefully before settling on Shu Huisheng as my marriage partner. I knew that Shu Huisheng was Minister Shu's concubine-born son, treated coldly by everyone at home, and had always been biding his time. If I won him over before he amazed the world in the imperial exams, he would surely be even more loyal to me. Besides, I know that the Shu Huisheng of the previous life had feelings for me. Otherwise, he wouldn't have rushed into the inferno to die alongside me. I know he will surely be loyal to me, But in this life, I have greater ambitions, so I need a sharper knife. It is enough just to use him. But without realizing when, I started hoping to hear this answer from his own lips. I gently shook my head to steady my nerves. I absolutely couldn't be bewitched by this seductive fox. I smiled, draped my arms over his shoulders, wrapped them around his neck, and with breath as sweet as orchids, I said, "But I want you to keep nothing from me, and to follow my wishes in everything." The treacherous minister of the age quietly blushed the tips of his ears. "Whatever my lady commands." As expected, news soon came that the emperor had fallen into a deep coma and the court was in chaos. Xiao Changsheng hurriedly summoned masters from all over the land, claiming that only sincere prayer could restore the emperor's health. Seizing this opportunity, he took control of a large number of imperial relatives and the families of key civil and military officials. As the emperor's personally appointed Princess Changle, I too became one of the hostages. The moment I stepped into Lijiang Palace, where the families were being held, I knew that the show was about to begin. Lijiang Palace is the most remote palace within the grounds. If something were to happen in the front court or the central palace, it would be hard to hear any commotion here. To guard against anyone escaping, the food sent in daily was incredibly crude, with portions just enough to fill one's stomach. When lives are at stake, everyone endures what they can. Staying alive is what matters most. But what was served to me every day was either shark fin and bird's nest, or delicacies from land and sea. The other detained female relatives frequently cast sidelong glances at me. By the fourth day, someone finally couldn't hold back, smashed a saucer, pointed at me, and said to the palace servant delivering the meal, "We've all been locked up by the crown prince, so why do we have to eat husks and greens while she eats so well?" The palace servant delivering the meal said indifferently, "We are just following orders. Please do not make things difficult for us servants, Commandery Princess." Commandery Princess Rui put her hands on her hips and snorted coldly. "I'd really like to know whose orders you are following, to fawn over a princess with no royal blood." The servant didn't want to answer, bowed, backed out, and closed the hall doors behind them. Underneath the food box that the servant had just placed by my desk, there was a very thin piece of paper tucked in. I quietly swept a glance at the slip of paper out of the corner of my eye. There were only a few words on it. "Yun is already pregnant. Proceed at any time." The female relatives' laughter buzzed like flies, and someone said snidely, "Don't forget, she used to be the crown princess. Maybe the crown prince still has lingering feelings." Laughter rose and fell, but not a single person genuinely stood on my side. After all, in their eyes, I was nothing but the wife of a sixth-rank compiler. But they forgot, I wasn't locked up in here because I am Shu Huisheng's wife, but because I am Princess Changle, personally titled by the emperor. I couldn't be bothered with these provocations. I just propped my cheek on one hand and closed my eyes to rest. But in my mind, I had already begun planning my next moves. In the Crown Prince's palace, my younger sister, side consort Wei, had lost her baby while vying for favor. That meant the child inside consort Yun's womb was going to be the Crown Prince's only bloodline. On the 7th day, the night was heavy and dark. The female relatives huddled in a corner of the palace, shivering. I wet my index finger with a bit of spit, gently poked a hole through the window paper, and peeked outside through the opening. The guards at Lijiang Palace tonight weren't as strict as they had been the past few days. Feeling relieved, I went back to my spot and sat down, wrapped my robe tight, and closed my eyes to rest. Around midnight, a sudden chaotic clatter of footsteps shattered the silence, catching me off guard and startling me awake. 6 or 7 torches lit up the open ground in front of Lijiang Palace. The palace doors were thrown wide open. Many of the women screamed in terror, as if the blade hanging over their heads had finally fallen. I looked up. Pei Shiwei charged in like a madwoman, her expression filled with hysteria and despair. She scanned the hall, finally locking onto me, then lunged over to grab my collar and demanded sharply, "Where did the Crown Prince go?" I calmly pried her hand away and said coldly, "Side consort Wei, isn't it a bit inappropriate to ask me, a prisoner kept here, a question like that?" Pei Shiwei yelled, flustered and exasperated. "Pei Jiaohua, stop acting. Xu Huasheng is nothing but your running dog. If not for him playing tricks, the crown prince would have ascended the throne long ago. You are jealous of me, jealous that the crown prince dotes on me while you are only fit to be the wife of a sixth-rank compiler. That is right, you are just jealous." I sneered. "Pei Shiwei, at this point, are you still deceiving yourself? If Xiao Chengsheng truly loved you, why didn't he take you with him when he fled?" I closed my eyes in thought. The secret reports received over the past few days, and the commotion outside Lizhang Palace surfacing in my mind. It was easy to deduce. Xiao Chengsheng's coup had failed. In my previous life, on the day the city fell, Xiao Chengsheng took Pei Shiwei and fled. But having been husband and wife with him for over a decade, I knew his heartlessness and selfishness best. He claimed to be deeply devoted, yet he broke laws and discipline, forcibly snatching commoner women who resembled his white moonlight. Because Pei Shiwei bore a 50% resemblance to that white moonlight, he indulged Pei Shiwei in wreaking havoc in the harem and murdering people. Even when the city fell and he took Pei Shiwei to escape, he merely treated her as a gift, ready to be offered up at any moment on the escape route. Pei Shiwei, however, remained obstinately deluded and roared, "You are jealous of me. The crown prince never loved you to begin with. You don't know, do you? The marriage swap was the crown prince's idea. You used your status as the legitimate daughter to suppress me for over a decade. But didn't you still lose to me?" She spun in a circle, laughing loudly, acting more and more crazed. I watched coldly, determined not to waste another word on her. But she just wouldn't let me be. Seize her. With her here, I don't believe Xu Husheng won't show up. The guards hesitated, but Pei Shiwei shouted a sharp rebuke, and everyone instantly surrounded me. Just as a pair of hands reached toward me, the sound of an arrow tearing through the air rang out. The guard who was about to touch me had his right hand pierced by a feathered arrow, pinning him to the pillar. "I'd like to see who dares," a biting voice shouted. Amidst the firelight, a figure walked slowly in through the palace doors, his cold gaze sweeping over everyone. Xu Huisheng, looking grim and holding a longbow, walked slowly toward me. The crown prince conspired with several princes to rebel and plotted to poison the emperor. They have been executed on the spot. We are now apprehending the remaining rebels. Side consort Wei, surrender now." As soon as he finished speaking, the imperial guards rushed in, quickly surrounding Pei Shiwei and the guards so tightly that not even water could escape. Xu Husheng's voice was cold, yet his movements were exceptionally gentle as he draped the cloak over me. Though Xu Huisheng's voice was cold, his actions were very gentle as he tied the cloak for me. I cast my gaze toward Pei Shiwei. Her face was pale, and she was completely panic-stricken, as if she had lost her soul. Xu Huisheng raised a hand, and Pei Shiwei was seized. She struggled and screamed desperately, even losing a shoe, but was still forcibly dragged away by the imperial guards. Immediately after, more imperial guards flooded in, asking the detained female relatives to withdraw. Witnessing the treatment Pei Shiwei just received, every one of them was terrified into silence, standing rooted to the spot, afraid to move. There wasn't a trace of pity for the fairer sex on Xu Husheng's face. My gaze swept sharply over everyone, and I said indifferently, "The internal unrest has been quelled. You may go home." Commandery Princess Ru Yi gritted her teeth and whispered, "Who knows if you have ulterior motives?" I gave a faint smile, my tone icy. "Then you could also try going straight to the imperial prison along with Pei Shiwei. How does that sound?" Her face instantly turned deathly pale, and she hurriedly turned and walked away fast. "I want to go home. I don't want to be locked up with that lunatic." My gaze lingered on the other female relatives. They dared not utter another word, hurrying away as they retreated with the imperial guards. In front of the vast Lijiang palace, only Xu Husheng and I were left. Xu Husheng looked at me affectionately. My gaze, however, leaped over the overlapping palace walls, landing in the direction of the throne hall. That farce of a coup staged by the crown prince was quickly suppressed by us. Those princes who entered the palace under the banner of ridding the emperor of evil ministers, wanting to take a gamble, did not in the slightest let down the muddy waters that Xu Huisheng and I had deliberately stirred up. There are always people who love to fish in troubled waters, aren't there? But no one was spared. Some died, some were crippled, and some went mad. As for whether they were truly crippled or truly mad, it doesn't matter. The old ministers who got involved in this affair, weren't they also demoted or executed as they deserved? Me heartless prime minister father was demoted to a petty 9th rank official. He was so angry he had a stroke and was paralyzed in bed. For a time, Shang Jing was in a state of jittery panic. This palace coup was also recorded in the history books as the Wuhan incident. The emperor was so enraged, he vomited blood, and ultimately didn't last half a month. The emperor's death was a national mourning. The entire country wore white, and music and banquets were suspended. The common people only cared about when they could resume holding weddings and funerals. The civil and military officials, however, were more concerned about the succession to the throne. As everyone knows now, almost all of the late emperor's sons perished in the Wuhan incident, and these princes didn't leave behind any heirs either, whether to select a young child from the imperial clan and place him on the throne. The civil and military officials turned the court upside down with their arguing. The Empress Dowager held court from behind the curtain. She was never a woman with a mind of her own to begin with, and the successive deaths of her son and husband left her absolutely devastated. As a result, the officials waged a war of words for 3 days, yet still hadn't decided on a successor to the throne. Xu Husheng was promoted 3 ranks in a row for his merit in saving the emperor, just enough to qualify for attending court in the Golden Hall. Waiting until those people were tired of arguing, he stepped forward, holding his court tablet, announcing that he had a matter to present. A group of slick old bureaucrats looked at this new top scholar, whose promotion was like an ascension. His posture was upright, yet he looked weary, as if he hadn't slept a wink last night. The Empress Dowager held a grudge over the Wuhan incident, in which Xu Husheng had played a major role, but she suppressed her impatience and let him speak. Thinking of the late emperor's grace and appreciation, I was overwhelmed with grief. Thus, what I thought of by day, I dreamt of by night. Last night, I dreamt of the Chuanglin banquet. The late emperor bestowed upon me a dragon-patterned golden light. I followed the golden light and unexpectedly walked to the Eastern Palace, where the light vanished. I rarely dream, so I wondered if this was a sign from the late emperor that the crown prince, even though this dream was absurd. Xu Husheng sounded so dead serious about it. Better to believe it is real than to assume it is not. The Empress Dowager hurriedly sent imperial physicians to the Eastern Palace to summon all of the crown prince's women for a pulse check, not even leaving out Pi Shiwei in the imperial prison. The court was kept waiting for 2 hours that day, yet no one dared to complain. Everyone was waiting to see Xu Huisheng make a fool of himself. 2 hours later, a eunuch came rushing in to report, walking so fast he almost tripped over the threshold. Side consort Yun is expecting. The Empress Dowager asked in disbelief, "Does the crown prince really have an heir?" Side consort Yun is already 3 months pregnant. It is just that she is in good health and had no reactions, so she hadn't noticed it all this time. The Empress Dowager wept with joy. The officials all breathed a sigh of relief as well, and when court was dismissed, their faces were all beaming with joy. I was also very happy, because side consort Yun is my person. If you say Pi Shiwei looks 50% like Xiao Chengsheng's white moonlight, then Lu Yunyun, and that white moonlight looked more like twin sisters. But they had no connection. The white moonlight moved with her husband's family and died in a foreign land long ago. Xiao Chengsheng prided himself on his deep affection, ordering his subordinates to search everywhere for women resembling his white moonlight. But Lu Yunyan didn't enter the Eastern Palace willingly. She had long since married. The couple was harmonious and treated each other with mutual respect. Xiao Chengsheng's men forcibly abducted her and imprisoned her in the crown prince's villa outside the palace. To force her to submit, Xiao Chengsheng used her family to threaten her. Lu Yunyan pretended to submit to him, but her longing for her family was overwhelming. Taking advantage of the moment, Xiao Chengsheng let his guard down. She escaped. Only after escaping did she realize that to root out the trouble completely, Xiao Chengsheng had killed her husband and family. She returned to the home she had been longing for, only to see a courtyard full of corpses. Later, Xiao Chengsheng sent people to snatch her back. But I saved her. I asked her if she wanted revenge. She knelt before me without a word and kowtowed 3 times loudly. After I had someone train her for a while, she entered the palace as the crown prince's white moonlight. Xiao Chengsheng heard that she had resisted her husband's family to the death, and begged her way back alone from a foreign land just to see him once. He was deeply moved and immediately made her a secondary consort. And for this identity to deceive the world, the crown prince's wet nurse also had to be eliminated. Even after years of separation, who wouldn't recognize their own daughter? I didn't expect Lu Yunyan to be so smart. She borrowed a knife to kill, using Pi Shiwei to get rid of the crown prince's wet nurse. She is my most important chess piece. Her child is the royal family's last bloodline, and will also become the support I rely on to stand in the world. I promised her that as long as she gives birth to this child, whether it is a boy or a girl, I will give her freedom. After the news of side consort Yun's pregnancy spread, Sheng Jing returned to peace once again. But Xu Huisheng didn't stop having those extremely mysterious prophetic dreams. Several times in a row, he spoke of the revelations from his dreams during morning court. He dreamed that there would be a rebellion in the northwest, so he ordered troops to be deployed there in advance. Sure enough, not long after, news came of a small rebellion in the northwest, which was suppressed early. Those rebellions originated from the Shu family of Qingchuan. Xu Huisheng showed no mercy. Although the rebellion was small, its implications were significant. Minister Xu was so angry that he cut off ties with him. He also said that Zhongyan might suffer a drought this year, so it was necessary to put great effort into building canals and digging wells. The officials felt that since Zhongyan is a land of fish and rice, there was no need to worry. Moreover, opening canals and digging wells costs a huge amount of money, which the government couldn't afford. I wrote a letter to the Meng clan in Yunzhong. Meng Yuanji took the lead, and the noble families donated money to build canals, dig wells, and divert water. Sure enough, after summer began, rainfall in Jiangnan decreased, and the canals and wells dug beforehand all came in handy. The officials went from being skeptical at first to treating his dreams like imperial decrees the moment he spoke of them. On the day side consort Yun gave birth to a prince, Xu Huisheng had another dream. Your subject dreamt last night that the emperor's star was dim and surrounded by evil spirits. Only a person of great fortune guarding the court and teaching the prince can ensure the royal bloodline remains safe. The Empress Dowager hurriedly asked, Minister Xu, who is the person of destiny, was there any guidance in the dream? Is it some great scholar? Xu Huisheng just remained silent, lowering his eyes as if hesitating about something. The Empress Dowager urged him repeatedly, and the officials persuaded him, but he still remained silent. The hall fell into an unbearable silence. The Empress Dowager's face darkened, and she spoke slowly. If you do not speak again, I will punish your entire family. I hear that you and Princess Changel share a deep love, Minister Xu. Surely you wouldn't bear to see her thrown into the imperial prison. The hall was completely silent. Only then did Xu Huisheng raise his head, spitting out a sentence as if forced against his will. The fated star points to none other than the Princess Changle's manor. The court erupted in an uproar. Some unknown lowered their voice and said, "No wonder Vice Minister Shu was troubled." Anyone saying this would sound like they were boasting. Soon, an old official stepped forward to report. Setting aside that Vice Minister Shu's dreams are always accurate, Princess Changle once saved the late emperor. Is she not exactly the person of destiny? Another person chimed in. When Princess Changle was born, there were auspicious signs. A wandering Taoist said back then that she would be below one person and above 10,000. When she married Vice Minister Shu, everyone thought it was a joke. But now, hasn't it come true? Someone else said. With the summer drought this year, if it weren't for Princess Changle writing to the Hmong clan of Yunzhong, Zhongyan would likely be facing a great disaster. The Hmong clan of Yunzhong is a family of scholars. Princess Changle was taught by the Hmong clan of Yunzhong from a young age and is exceptionally talented. Surely she can also teach the Little Highness. Shu Huisheng only just broached the subject, and everyone began chiming in, one after another. Shu Huisheng stepped back into his original rank, lowered his head, and curled his lips into a smile. As long as the previous few dreams came true, no one would suspect that this dream he spoke of was fake. 2 years later, Lu Yunyun faked her death to escape. The Empress Dowager remembered Pei Shiwei, who had gone mad locked in the imperial prison, and ordered her execution. The night before Pei Shiwei was to be executed, I went to the imperial prison to see her. She was rarely lucid, but the moment she saw me, she seemed to go crazy again, lunging at me, only to slam into the wooden bars of the cell. Her hand reached out through the fence, waving desperately. "Pei Zhaohua, you take the position of crown princess when you want it, but when you don't want it anymore, you won't let anyone else touch it. Twice, I've fallen into your hands." She laughed maniacally, her eyes suddenly gleaming as she raved. "But who is to say that in the third life, I won't be the one to awaken my memories first?" Pei Shiwei struck an orchid finger pose, mimicking the movements of a haden singing in an opera. "When the time comes, the crown prince will definitely be charmed by me." I stood neither too far nor too close, sneering. "You are still going to lose. Treating a man's favor as your lifelong crutch is the stupidest way to live." Pei Shiwei shouted, "You are the ridiculous one. So what if he is the future head of the Hmong clan of Yunzhong? He is still just one of your dogs." Suddenly thinking of something, she covered her mouth and chuckled lightly. "Oh, and that mad dog Shu Huisheng. To use him, you, the mother of the nation, actually lowered yourself to marry such a lowly person." She was losing her grip on reality again, starting to mix up her past life and this life. But she was right about one thing. Men, well, what is the difference between them and dogs? Xiao Changsheng is promiscuous by nature, just like a dog can't stop eating shit. But if you train them well, they will be loyal to you forever. I flicked my sleeves and left the dungeon, never sparing another glance at this pitiful woman. 3 years later, the Empress Dowager passed away. 5 years later, I no longer ruled from behind the curtain, but stood directly in the court. 7 years later, the imperial study Shu Huisheng was teaching the little emperor poetry and literature. But the child's heart wasn't in it. As soon as class started, he wanted to run away. Shu Huisheng often had to play cat and mouse with him for an hour before things could quiet down. The memorials on the table remained unreviewed. Listening to the tender voice reading aloud, for the first time, my mind was not on state affairs. I dug out a map of Great Zhou, my vermilion brush hovering over it, motionless for a long time. In the years I've been regent, I've quelled rebellions and subdued border nations, making them pay tribute as vassals every year. I've lightened forced labor and severely punished corrupt officials. Most importantly, I've established independent female households and promoted education for girls, enabling women to understand reason and see the vastness of the world. After zoning out for a moment, I used the vermilion brush to circle the location of Shangjing. It is high time I took my turn sitting on this dragon throne.